Trembling with rage, Dr. James Wilson watches as three major airlines ground to a halt, costing millions. The airport screens flash his face alongside "Aviation Revolutionary." 24 hours earlier, flight attendants had dragged him from his first-class seat, unaware he controlled their company's fate. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of power, discrimination, and justice, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers who believe in accountability. Now, let's discover how one man's humiliation turned into an airline industry's reckoning. Dr. James Wilson never imagined his name would become synonymous with the greatest disruption in modern aviation history. Long before he controlled the fate of three major airlines with a single phone call, he was simply a brilliant mind with big dreams. Born to middle-class parents in Baltimore, James showed exceptional aptitude for mathematics and computer science from an early age. His father, a high school physics teacher, nurtured his talents, staying up late helping him build his first computer when he was just 12 years old. His mother, a nurse who worked night shifts, instilled in him a sense of dignity and self-worth that would become his armor in a world that often judged him by his skin color rather than his abilities. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't achieve," she would tell him every morning before school. "Your mind is your greatest weapon." Those words echoed in his head when he received a full scholarship to Howard University, where he graduated at the top of his computer science class. With multiple job offers from Silicon Valley, James believed his academic excellence would shield him from the discrimination his parents had warned him about. Reality proved harsher. During his first job interview at a prestigious tech firm in San Francisco, the interviewer examined his resume with a skeptical eye. "Howard University? That's interesting. We usually hire from Stanford or MIT," the interviewer said, not bothering to hide his condescension. Despite outperforming other candidates in technical assessments, James received rejection after rejection, often watching less qualified white graduates land positions he had been denied. After 6 months of frustration, he secured a junior developer position at a small aviation software company. The salary was half what his classmates received, but James saw opportunity where others saw limitation. Aviation technology was outdated, relying on systems designed in the 80s and 90s. While his colleagues went home at 5, James stayed until midnight, learning everything about flight operations, scheduling algorithms, and safety protocols. Within 3 years, he had developed a revolutionary software prototype that could optimize flight schedules while simultaneously monitoring thousands of safety parameters in real time. When he presented it to his supervisors, they patted him on the back and filed it away. "Good work, James. We'll look into it someday," his manager said, never intending to disrupt their comfortable position in the industry. That night, James resigned and took his prototype with him. With his life savings of $34,000, he founded Aerotech Solutions from his one-bedroom apartment. The first year was brutal. Airlines were notoriously resistant to change, especially from a newcomer with no industry connections. His breakthrough came when a devastating scheduling error at a regional airline led to an overnight stranding of 2,000 passengers. The airline's CEO, desperate for solutions, took a chance on James's software. The results were immediate and impressive. A 30% reduction in delays, 15% fuel savings, and a customer satisfaction rating that soared. Word spread quickly. Within 5 years, Aerotech Solutions grew from a one-man operation to a company employing over 300 people. James's software became the backbone of modern aviation, transforming how airlines scheduled flights, maintained aircraft, and responded to disruptions. By his 35th birthday, James had secured contracts with 8 major airlines across North America. His philosophy remained consistent: quiet excellence rather than self-promotion. He hired based on talent, creating one of the most diverse workforces in the tech industry. His executive team included people of all backgrounds, bound by their exceptional abilities rather than their appearances. The crowning achievement came last month when United Continental, American Airways, and SkyWest simultaneously signed a $1.2 billion contract to implement Aerotech's latest system upgrade. This single contract would revolutionize air travel across the continent, integrating artificial intelligence to predict and prevent disruptions before they occurred. The night after signing, James celebrated with his wife, Amara, a pediatric surgeon he had met during a flight delay 12 years earlier, and their teenage children, Zora and Isaiah. They dined at their favorite restaurant, a small Ethiopian place near their Atlanta home, far from the glitz one might expect from a tech mogul worth hundreds of millions. To the man who changed the sky, Amara toasted, raising her glass of Teji, Ethiopian honey wine. James smiled, thinking of how far he had come. To family, he countered. The reason for everything. Despite his success, James maintained rigorous oversight of his company, flying weekly between regional offices to ensure quality control. These flights had become a laboratory of sorts, allowing him to observe his software in action and identify improvements. Though he could easily afford private jets, he deliberately flew commercial, usually in first class, to maximize work time. These flights also exposed him to a reality his wealth couldn't shield him from: the persistent sting of racial prejudice. Flight attendants often assumed he was in the wrong seat. Gate agents double-checked his boarding pass with suspicious eyes. Fellow passengers sometimes requested seat changes when assigned next to him. James weathered these indignities with the practiced calm of a black man who had learned that displaying anger only reinforced stereotypes. The week after the historic contract signing, his executive team gathered in the Atlanta headquarters for their monthly strategy meeting. Vanessa Taylor, his chief legal officer and Harvard Law graduate, noticed the dark circles under James's eyes. "You're pushing too hard," she said during a break. "When was the last time you took a vacation?" James couldn't remember. Between building the company, raising his children, and maintaining his marriage, leisure time had become a foreign concept. "The Denver office needs my final approval on the integration plan," he deflected. "Then the Chicago team wants to discuss the new security protocols." His chief operations officer, Richard Dawson, joined the conversation. "We've got this covered. You need rest before implementation begins. Once that starts, none of us will sleep for months." After much persuasion, James agreed to a 2-week family vacation after one final trip to Denver. He booked a first-class ticket on Flight 2247 from Atlanta, planning to return the following evening for a long-awaited family getaway to Bora Bora. The night before his flight, James packed methodically as always. His lucky tie, a gift from Amara on their first anniversary, his family photos, one from Isaiah's basketball championship, another from Zora's science fair victory, a small notebook where he jotted ideas that often became industry innovations. He couldn't have known these ordinary items would become evidence in a case that would shake the airline industry to its foundation. He couldn't have known that his next flight would test not just his dignity but his power to change a system that had humiliated black travelers for generations. As he kissed Amara goodbye the next morning, she straightened his collar with the tenderness of a woman still in love after 15 years of marriage. "Come home safe," she said, their routine parting words. "Always," he replied, not knowing that his definition of safety was about to be fundamentally challenged. The morning air buzzed with humid Atlanta heat as James arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Despite being the CEO of Aerotech Solutions, he preferred traveling light, one carry-on suitcase containing his essentials and a sleek laptop bag holding the tools of his trade. Today he had chosen comfort over corporate appearance, wearing a Howard University hoodie, jeans, and his favorite sneakers. The casual attire was a small rebellion against the constant pressure to present himself as exceptionally professional to counteract racial stereotypes. James navigated the familiar terminal with practiced ease, bypassing the check-in counters in favor of the mobile boarding pass on his phone. At security, he noticed the subtle shift in the TSA agent's expression when examining his first-class ticket. A momentary flicker of surprise he had grown accustomed to over years of travel. "Sir, could you step aside for additional screening?" the agent asked, despite the scanner showing no alerts. James complied without comment, arms extended. For the wand, face neutral despite the indignity. The travelers behind him, mostly white businessmen in similar casual attire, passed through without additional scrutiny. After clearing security, James headed to the first-class lounge, where another subtle interaction awaited. The receptionist glanced at his hoodie, then at his digital boarding pass, her perfectly manicured finger hovering over her keyboard. "I'll need to see some identification," she said, though she had greeted the previous guest with only a smile. James produced his driver's license without comment. The receptionist's demeanor shifted instantly upon seeing his name. "Oh, Dr. Wilson, I didn't recognize you. Please enjoy the lounge." Inside, James chose a quiet corner to review his presentation for the Denver team. The implementation timeline was aggressive, requiring perfect coordination across all three airlines. As he typed notes on potential improvements, he remained aware of curious glances from other lounge patrons. When boarding time approached, he packed his laptop and headed to gate A22. The gate agent, a young woman with a nameplate reading Tiffany, called for first-class passengers. James stepped forward, presenting his boarding pass. "Oh," she said, scanning his ticket with visible surprise. "Yes, you're in first class boarding now." The jetway welcomed him to Flight 2247, where flight attendant Bethany Carter greeted passengers. Her smile faltered momentarily upon seeing James. "Sir, first class is to the left," she said, emphasizing first class, as if questioning his belonging there. James nodded politely and found his window seat, 2A. He stored his carry-on in the overhead compartment and settled in, removing his presentation materials before stowing his laptop bag under the seat in front of him. As other first-class passengers boarded, he noticed their quick, evaluative glances, a familiar experience that never lost its sting. The seat beside him remained empty as boarding continued. James used the time to review his notes, highlighting key points for the Denver meeting. He was so absorbed in his work that he barely noticed when a commotion began at the front of the cabin. William Thornton had arrived. A middle-aged white executive with silver hair and an expensive suit that announced his status. Thornton boarded late, speaking loudly into his phone about market projections and quarterly reports. The flight attendants fawned over him immediately, taking his coat and offering a pre-departure champagne that wasn't extended to other passengers. When Thornton reached row 2, he stopped abruptly, staring at James with unconcealed displeasure. "I believe there's been a mistake," Thornton announced, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I always sit in 2A or 2B. Flight attendant Patricia Miller rushed over, her customer service smile firmly in place. "Let me check your boarding pass, sir." Thornton handed it over with the confident air of a man accustomed to getting his way. Miller examined it and frowned slightly. "Sir, you're assigned to 5C in economy comfort." Thornton's face reddened. "That's unacceptable. I'm a platinum member. I was promised an upgrade if available, and clearly," he gestured toward James, "there's been some confusion." James continued reviewing his notes, pretending not to hear, though his shoulders tensed imperceptibly. Miller lowered her voice, but not enough to prevent James from hearing. "Let me see what I can do, Mr. Thornton." She disappeared briefly, returning with Bethany Carter. Both approached James, their expressions professionally neutral, but eyes cold. "Excuse me, sir," Carter began. "Could I see your boarding pass again?" James looked up, his expression calm, though his heart rate accelerated. He had experienced this scenario too many times to count. He passed his phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. Carter examined it with exaggerated scrutiny. "And do you have a physical boarding pass as well?" "No," James replied evenly. "I checked in online." Miller joined in. "Sir, there seems to be some confusion with the seating arrangement. Mr. Thornton is one of our platinum members and he was promised an upgrade." "I understand," James said, maintaining his composure. "However, I purchased this specific seat for this flight. My boarding pass confirms that." Carter's smile tightened. "Sir, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in another seat. We can offer you an economy comfort seat with extra legroom." James felt the familiar burn of indignity in his chest, but kept his voice steady. "I appreciate the offer, but I'll stay in my assigned seat that I purchased." By now, other first-class passengers were watching the interaction. An elderly white woman across the aisle leaned toward her husband and whispered loudly enough to be heard, He should just move to economy where he belongs. The husband nodded in agreement. Probably use points to upgrade anyway. James pretended not to hear, though each word landed like a physical blow. Thornton remained standing in the aisle, his presence a looming pressure. The cabin speaker crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Richard Stevens. We're experiencing a slight delay due to a seating issue. Please remain patient as our crew resolves this matter." Miller's expression hardened. "Sir, we need to depart. Would you reconsider moving to accommodate Mr. Thornton?" "I'm sorry," James replied, his voice still calm but firmer now. "I purchased this seat. My boarding pass confirms this is my assigned seat. I'm not obligated to move." Thornton interjected, "I was promised an upgrade. This is ridiculous." Carter left briefly, returning with a third flight attendant and a man in plain clothes who James recognized as an air marshal. The situation was escalating beyond reason. "Sir," the new flight attendant said, "I'm the purser for this flight. We need you to comply with crew member instructions." James felt a surge of both anger and clarity. With deliberate movements, he removed his phone and began recording. "I am complying with all safety instructions," he stated clearly for the recording. "I am sitting in my assigned seat 2A, which I purchased. I have shown my valid boarding pass. I am not being disruptive. I am being asked to give up my seat because another passenger wants it, though he is assigned to a different seat." The air marshal stepped closer. "Sir, put the phone away." "I'm documenting this interaction for my protection," James replied. Thornton's voice rose. "This is delaying the entire flight. Just move him so we can take off." The atmosphere in the cabin grew tense. Some passengers stared at their phones, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Others watched with open curiosity or disdain. Captain Stevens appeared from the cockpit, his expression grim. "What's the situation here?" Miller explained in hushed tones, gesturing toward James and Thornton. The captain approached James. "Sir, as the captain of this aircraft, I have the authority to remove any passenger I deem disruptive. I'm asking you to comply with the crew's request." James met his gaze steadily. "Captain, with all due respect, I'm sitting in my assigned seat with a valid ticket. I haven't violated any rules or been disruptive. I'm simply declining to give up the seat I purchased to another passenger who wants it." "Sir, this is the final warning," the captain stated. "Either move to the seat being offered, or you'll be removed from this flight." James continued recording as he replied, "I understand you have that authority, Captain. Please understand I'm exercising my rights as a paying customer. If you remove me, I want it clearly stated for the record that I'm being removed for refusing to give up my properly purchased seat to accommodate another passenger's preference." The captain's jaw tightened. He nodded to the air marshal. "Remove him." What followed would later be described in viral videos and news reports across the country. The air marshal and a male flight attendant physically removed James from his seat. Though he didn't resist, they gripped his arms with unnecessary force, causing his phone to fall. A nearby passenger picked it up, continuing to record as James was escorted off the plane. On the jetway, away from other passengers' eyes, the humiliation deepened. His carry-on was roughly thrust at him. His laptop bag was searched under the guise of security concerns. All while James maintained a dignified silence, his mind cataloging every action, every face, every name badge. As the door closed behind him, James heard the muffled announcement thanking passengers for their patience during the security incident. He stood alone in the empty jetway, his body still but his mind racing with calculations more complex than any aviation algorithm he had ever designed. They had no idea who they had just removed from that plane. They had no idea what he controlled. They had no idea what was coming. In that moment, Dr. James Wilson, the invisible black man they had humiliated, made a decision that would ground not just this flight, but 3 entire airlines. The terminal felt eerily quiet as James collected himself, the ambient noise of announcements and rolling suitcases fading beneath the pounding of blood in his ears. He found an empty gate area and sat down, his hands trembling slightly as he retrieved his phone from his pocket. The recording was intact, 7 minutes and 23 seconds of undeniable discrimination. As he watched the video, a memory surfaced from 25 years earlier. He was 12, sitting beside his father on a bus when the driver had ordered them to move to the back despite vacant seats throughout. His father had complied silently, and later that night, James had questioned him. "Why didn't you say something, Dad? Why did we move?" His father's eyes had contained a universe of resignation and survival wisdom. "Sometimes, son, you choose your battles, not because you're afraid, but because you're smart. Remember, they can control where you sit, but never who you are." James had vowed then to never move when he had the right to stay. Yet here he was, removed, despite his right to remain. The difference was that 12-year-old James had possessed only righteous indignation. 42-year-old James possessed power. His phone buzzed with a text from Amara. "Landed yet? Dinner reservations at 7. James dialed her number, drawing a deep breath to steady his voice. "James, everything okay?" Amara asked immediately, attuned to the slightest changes in his tone after 15 years of marriage. "Not exactly," he replied, explaining what had happened in measured words that belied the turmoil beneath. Amara's response was immediate and fierce. "That's outrageous. You should sue them into oblivion." "I'm thinking of something more effective," James said, an edge entering his voice. "Cancel the reservations. I won't be home tonight." After assuring Amara he was physically unharmed, James ended the call and requested a meeting with the airport manager. 20 minutes later, he sat across from Gregory Palmer, a balding white man whose patronizing smile suggested he had handled countless difficult passengers. "Dr. Wilson, on behalf of the airport authority, I want to express our regret for this unfortunate incident," Palmer began, his tone conveying anything but regret. "I need documentation," James interrupted calmly. "The names of every employee involved, from the gate agent to the captain. I need CCTV footage of the jetway. I need written confirmation that I was removed from a flight despite having a valid ticket and assigned seat." Palmer's smile faltered. "Sir, perhaps we can offer you a voucher for future travel." "Mr. Palmer," James cut in, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness, "I'm not interested in vouchers. I want documentation of what occurred, as is my right. Also, I'd like you to note that at no point did anyone ask for my identification beyond my boarding pass. At no point did anyone inquire about my profession or why I was traveling." Palmer shifted uncomfortably. "I'll see what I can do, but these requests typically go through customer relations. Today," James insisted, "I'll wait." While Palmer made calls, James checked social media. Already partial videos were circulating. A black passenger in a hoodie being escorted off a plane. The airline's PR team had issued a statement about removing a disruptive passenger who refused to comply with crew instructions, carefully avoiding any mention of the seat reassignment attempt. Would you stand up to injustice even at great personal cost? Comment number 1 if you believe James should use his power to fight back, or number 2 if you think he should take the high road and simply file a complaint. Hit that like button if you've ever had to swallow your pride in the face of discrimination, and subscribe for more stories of power and justice. But here's the real question. What would you do if you suddenly held the power to bring an entire industry to its knees? Let's see how James navigates this crossroads. James checked into an airport hotel rather than taking the next flight. In his room, he called Vanessa Taylor, his chief legal officer. "They did what?" Vanessa's voice rose in disbelief as James recounted the incident. "I need options," James replied, his tone clinical now, emotions sealed behind a wall of strategic thinking. "Legally, we could file discrimination charges, pursue a civil rights case." "I'm thinking about the contracts," James interrupted. "Specifically, Section 14.3 regarding emergency system maintenance." A moment of silence followed as Vanessa processed his implication. "James, that would affect millions of travelers." "I'm aware. The contracts allow for it, but the reputational risk." "What about my reputation?" James asked quietly. "What about the message it sends if I simply accept this treatment because fighting back might inconvenience others?" They spent the next 2 hours developing a multi-phase response plan. Phase 1 would target the airline's reputation through strategic media placement. Phase 2 would implement necessary system diagnostics that would slow their reservation and scheduling systems. Phase 3, if needed, would activate the emergency maintenance protocol, effectively grounding their fleet until James authorized restoration. "The timing is crucial," Vanessa cautioned. "If we move too quickly, it looks vindictive. Too slowly, and the news cycle moves on." 24 hours, James decided. "We give them 24 hours to identify the issue correctly and respond appropriately." After the call, James received a text from Zora. "Dad, you're trending." Attached was a TikTok video showing his removal, already at 300,000 views with the hashtag #WarnFirstClassWhileBlack. James stared at the ceiling of his hotel room, contemplating a lifetime of keeping calm in the face of discrimination. How many times had he swallowed his rage when pulled over for driving his Mercedes in an affluent neighborhood? How many times had he nodded politely when security followed him around high-end stores? How many times had he patiently re-explained his credentials to people who assumed he was the help rather than the boss? This time would be different. This time, he had leverage that few black men ever possessed: the ability to cause real consequences for a system that had humiliated him. As he drafted a press statement and reviewed the legal documentation Vanessa had sent, James felt a grim resolve hardening within him. He tried to sleep but found himself revisiting past discrimination incidents in nightmarish loops. The college professor who accused him of cheating because his work was too good. The bank loan officer who required extra collateral despite his perfect credit score. The real estate agent who steered him away from certain neighborhoods for his own comfort. Dawn found him at the window, watching planes take off and land with clockwork precision. Precision his software made possible. Today, those responsible would learn exactly who they had removed from that plane. Today, the consequences would begin. As morning light filtered through the Denver skyscrapers, airline CEO Thomas Bradley scrolled through his emails with irritation. Among budget reports and operational updates, a message with the subject line, "Incident Report, Flight 2247, caught his attention. He skimmed the contents, his expression hardening at phrases like "removed passenger" and "possible social media situation." Bradley forwarded the email to his PR director with a brief note. "Handle this, offer standard compensation, and make it go away. We don't need another viral story." In his 30 years with the airline, Bradley had weathered countless passenger complaints. In his experience, most people accepted vouchers and apologies, their indignation fading once they calculated the monetary value of their principles. Within the hour, a carefully worded email arrived in James Wilson's inbox. "Dear valued customer, we sincerely apologize for your experience on Flight 2247. At airline name, we strive to provide excellent service to all our passengers. As a gesture of goodwill, we would like to offer you a $250 travel voucher for a future flight. Thank you for your understanding. Customer Relations Team." James read the message twice, noting the absence of any specific acknowledgement of what had occurred. No mention of being forcibly removed from his rightfully purchased seat. No recognition of the racial component. Not even a human name attached to the apology. He forwarded the email to Vanessa with a single word: "Proceed." 30 minutes later, James walked into the Denver office of Aerotech Solutions. The receptionist's eyes widened in surprise. "Dr. Wilson, we weren't expecting you until this afternoon." "Plans changed," James replied, his voice neutral. "Please inform the executive team I need to see them immediately." As word spread of his arrival, employees exchanged confused glances. Their CEO rarely deviated from his meticulously planned schedule. Something significant had happened. In the SATE main conference room, James connected his laptop to the display screen as his Denver leadership team assembled. He waited until everyone was seated before speaking. "Yesterday, I was forcibly removed from a first-class seat I had purchased on Flight 2247, he began, his voice steady. "Not because I was disruptive, not because of overbooking, but because a white passenger wanted my seat, and the crew deemed his comfort more important than my rights." He played the video recording. The room fell silent except for a few shocked, gasps when the air marshal physically removed him from his seat. This morning, the airline offered me a $250 voucher as compensation, James continued after the video ended. They have made no effort to investigate what happened. They have issued no genuine apology. They have identified no consequences for the employees involved. Alexander Chen, the Denver operations director, spoke first. James, this is absolutely unacceptable. But what's our next step? A lawsuit? I've called an emergency board meeting, James replied. I'm proposing we invoke Section 14.3 of our service contracts. A murmur rippled through the room. Everyone present understood what that meant. Under Section 14.3, Aerotech could initiate emergency system maintenance that would severely restrict airline operations until completed. Sofia Rodriguez, Chief Financial Officer, raised concerns immediately. James, I understand your anger, but this could damage our relationships with all three airlines. We're talking about billions in future contracts. I'm not angry, Sofia. I'm resolved, James corrected. And I'm not suggesting this lightly. But consider the message we send if I, the CEO of this company, accept this treatment without meaningful response. What does that say to our employees who face similar discrimination? What does that say about our corporate values? The virtual board meeting began 30 minutes later. James presented the facts dispassionately, showing the video and outlining the airline's dismissive response. He then presented his proposed three-phase strategy. Board member Gerald Franklin, a 70-year-old white man with 40 years in aviation, spoke first. While I sympathize with your experience, James, this seems disproportionate. One incident, however unfortunate, doesn't justify disrupting national air travel. With respect, Gerald, James replied, this is not one incident. This is a systemic issue that affects countless travelers who lack my resources to fight back. What happened to me happens daily to people who can't ground airlines in response. Vanessa Taylor supported him. From a legal perspective, our contracts explicitly allow for maintenance when needed. We're not violating any agreements. After 90 minutes of debate, the board voted. Despite some reservations, they unanimously supported James's approach, with the condition that each phase would be evaluated before escalation. Thank you for your trust, James said as the meeting concluded. I don't take this lightly, and I believe this stand will ultimately strengthen our company's reputation as one that values dignity and justice. With board approval secured, James instructed his team to proceed with Phase 1. A subtle warning was sent to airline executives, a technical notification about possible system inconsistencies requiring attention. Like most warnings from technical vendors, it was routed to the IT department and never reached CEO Bradley's desk. Meanwhile, Bradley had dismissed the incident entirely after learning the passenger's name and seeing a still image from the video. Just another entitled passenger who didn't follow crew instructions, he told his executive team during their morning meeting. PR is handling it with the standard response. By early afternoon, James's technical team initiated the first limited system diagnostic. The impact was designed to be noticeable but not crippling. Reservation systems slowed by 30%, seat assignments occasionally glitching, boarding passes printing with delays. Airline operations centers began noting unusual system behavior. Help desk tickets multiplied as gate agents reported increasing delays. IT departments ran standard diagnostics but found no internal issues. The source was external, embedded in the very software that controlled their operations. At 3 o'clock, James received a call from airline customer relations offering increased compensation, now $1,000 in travel vouchers. He declined politely and requested to speak directly with CEO Bradley. I'm afraid Mr. Bradley isn't available for individual customer concerns, the representative explained. But I've been authorized to offer you our sincere apologies and assure you we're investigating the incident. Thank you, James replied. Please inform your superiors that Dr. James Wilson, CEO of Aerotech Solutions, expects a call from Mr. Bradley by close of business today. The system issues your airline is experiencing may be related to our conversation. Silence followed. then a stammered response. "Dr. Wilson? From Aerotech? I'll pass that message along immediately." As evening approached, James sat in his hotel room looking at a family photo taken at his father's 70th birthday last year. His father, the man who had moved to the back of the bus to protect his son, smiled proudly, arm around James's shoulders. "What would you think of what I'm doing, Dad?" James whispered to the image. "Would you understand, or would you tell me to rise above it?" His phone remained silent. No call from Bradley. No acknowledgement of the connection between their disruptive passenger and the man who controlled their operational software. James texted Vanessa, "Proceed to phase 2 tomorrow morning." The chess pieces were moving. The airlines had failed to recognize the opening gambit. Tomorrow, they would understand exactly who they were playing against. Day 2 dawned with chaos brewing in newsrooms across America. What had begun as a relatively contained social media incident was exploding into a national conversation. The hashtag #FirstClassWhileBlack trended as multiple videos of James's removal surfaced, each showing a calm, professional black man being physically escorted off a plane despite having done nothing wrong. Breakfast news programs ran the footage on repeat. Disturbing video emerges of black passenger removed from first class to accommodate white traveler, read the captions. Social media detectives had already identified the flight number, airline, and approximate time, though James's identity remained unknown to the public. James watched the coverage from his Denver hotel room while finishing a room service breakfast. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and colleagues who recognized him in the videos. He responded to each with a simple, "I'm handling it." At precisely 9 a.m. Eastern Time, James authorized the release of his identity to a selected journalist from The Washington Post, a reporter known for thorough coverage of corporate ethics and racial justice. By 9:30, the first online article appeared with the headline, "Black passenger removed from first class revealed as CEO who controls airline software." The story spread like wildfire. The revelation that the disruptive passenger was actually Dr. James Wilson, founder and CEO of Aerotech Solutions, the company whose software powered the operations of major airlines, transformed the narrative instantly. Financial news networks cut to breaking coverage as airline stocks began to dip. In the corporate headquarters of the airline, CEO Thomas Bradley was in the middle of a routine budget meeting when his assistant burst in. "Sir, we have an emergency," she said, handing him a tablet displaying the Washington Post article. "The passenger from yesterday's incident is James Wilson." Bradley's face drained of color as he read, "Aerotech Solutions? The same Aerotech that runs our—" His voice trailed off as the implications sank in. "Yes, sir. And IT reports that the system issues we've been experiencing since yesterday are escalating. They believe it may be connected." Bradley immediately adjourned the meeting and called an emergency session with his executive team. As they assembled, the airline's board chairman was already calling, demanding explanations. "Thomas, tell me you didn't authorize removing the CEO of Aerotech from one of our planes," the chairman said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I wasn't informed of the specifics," Bradley defended. "It was handled as a standard disruptive passenger situation." "Fix this," the chairman ordered. "Whatever it takes. Their software controls 80% of our operations. We're already seeing delays system-wide, and our stock is down 4% since the market opened." Bradley instructed his assistant to contact James immediately, but the calls went straight to voicemail. When they tried through Aerotech's corporate office, they were directed to the legal department, where Vanessa Taylor informed them that Dr. Wilson was unavailable but had authorized her to receive messages. "Ms. Taylor, we need to resolve this situation immediately," Bradley insisted. "The system slowdowns are causing significant disruptions." "I understand your concern, Mr. Bradley," Vanessa replied coolly. "Dr. Wilson has authorized me to inform you that Aerotech is conducting necessary system diagnostics following an unexpected error pattern. These diagnostics require reduced operational capacity." "What unexpected errors? This is clearly retaliation." "Sir, I suggest you review Section 14.3 of our service agreement regarding emergency maintenance protocols. I should also mention, that Dr. Wilson has authorized me to release the full video of his treatment on your airline to major news outlets this afternoon, unless we receive a satisfactory response addressing the specific incident. As Bradley and his team scrambled to formulate a response, James implemented phase 2 of his strategy. At 11 a.m., Aerotech initiated a full system diagnostic that required all 3 airlines using their software to reduce operations by 40%. The effects were immediate and dramatic. At airports nationwide, departure boards flickered as hundreds of flights were delayed or canceled. Customer service lines stretched through terminals. Social media flooded with angry passengers, demanding explanations. Flight attendants Bethany Carter and Patricia Miller were placed on administrative leave pending investigation, their names having been identified in the growing social media storm. Captain Richard Stevens was called in to meet with airline investigators, where he defended his actions. "I was responding to a crew report of a disruptive passenger," Stevens insisted. "How was I supposed to know who he was?" "Perhaps by checking his identification before removing him from the aircraft," the investigator suggested, "or by investigating why he was being labeled disruptive in the first place." Meanwhile, the internet had identified William Thornton, the passenger who had demanded James's seat. His company, a mid-sized investment firm, issued a hasty statement distancing themselves from his actions and placing him on leave. By midday, James was receiving calls from civil rights leaders offering support and media outlets requesting interviews. He declined all media appearances, allowing the situation to unfold without further input. His silence was more powerful than any statement could be. In the airline's operations centers, the situation was growing dire. Not only were current flights affected, but the scheduling algorithms for the coming days were showing cascading disruptions. Without full access to Aerotech's software, they couldn't efficiently reschedule or reroute aircraft. An emergency meeting of the airline's board was convened to discuss CEO Bradley's position. While some defended him as being unaware of the specifics, others argued that the culture that allowed such an incident fell squarely under his leadership. Whether he knew or not, this happened on his watch, one board member argued, and his response has been completely inadequate. From EIS, his temporary command center in the Denver office, James monitored the impact of the system restrictions. His team had carefully designed them to cause significant operational disruption without compromising safety. Every flight still in the air had full system support, but new departures were severely limited. "The other 2 airlines are calling non-stop," his administrative assistant reported. "They want to know why they're being punished for another airline's actions." "Remind them that all 3 signed the same contract," James replied. "The maintenance affects the integrated system that serves all of them. Also, inform them that we've seen concerning error patterns in their subsystems as well that require immediate attention." By late afternoon, the first airline announced an emergency press conference scheduled for the following morning. No details were provided, but industry insiders speculated that major changes were coming. As evening fell, James sat alone in his office, contemplating whether his response was proportionate or excessive. The images of travelers stranded in airports weighed on him. Children missing family events, people delayed for important meetings, medical appointments, weddings. Yet whenever doubt crept in, he recalled the feeling of being physically removed from his seat. The public humiliation, the assumptions made about him based solely on his appearance, the casual dismissal of his rights. He thought of his children watching these videos, learning once again that their father's accomplishments provided no shield against prejudice. His phone rang, Amara calling for their evening check-in. "The kids are worried about you," she said after confirming he was okay. "Zora keeps defending you in her social media groups. Isaiah is quieter, but I caught him watching the videos repeatedly." "Tell them I'm okay," James assured her, "and that sometimes you have to stand firm when you're wronged, not just for yourself but for everyone who can't fight back." "Just come home soon," Amara said softly. "They need their father. I need my husband." After the call, James sent instructions for Phase 3, the most severe system restrictions, that would effectively ground all 3 airlines by morning unless an acceptable resolution was reached. The chess game had entered its critical phase. The airlines now understood who their opponent was. But did they understand what he truly wanted? Not money, not revenge, but acknowledgement, accountability, and genuine change. Tomorrow would tell whether they had learned this crucial lesson. By dawn of the third day, the aviation crisis had reached unprecedented proportions. Major airports resembled refugee camps, with thousands of stranded passengers sleeping on floors, lining up at customer service counters, and frantically rebooking. On competing airlines that were quickly reaching capacity, CNN displayed a split screen. On one side, chaos at O'Hare International Airport. On the other, Aerotech's stock price climbing as the market recognized the company's extraordinary leverage over the industry. Economic analysts estimated losses at $4 million per hour across the three affected airlines, with ripple effects throughout the travel industry. In the Oval Office, the president received a briefing on the transportation crisis. Three major carriers effectively grounded because one black executive was discriminated against, the transportation secretary explained. It's unprecedented. Has anyone from the administration spoken with Dr. Wilson? The president asked. We've reached out, sir. His office says he's only communicating through his legal team at this point. And the airlines? They're in crisis management mode. The primary airline involved has called an emergency board meeting. Rumor has it their CEO is being asked to step aside. On Capitol Hill, several congressional leaders called for investigations into both the discrimination incident and the airline's emergency preparedness. This situation reveals two crises simultaneously, Congresswoman Patricia Johnson stated in a morning press conference. First, the ongoing reality of racial discrimination that even the most successful Black Americans face daily. Second, the dangerous vulnerability in our transportation infrastructure when one software provider can bring air travel to a standstill. At his Denver hotel, James received the daily security briefing from his chief of security. Sir, we're seeing increased threats on social media. Nothing specific enough for law enforcement action, but concerning nonetheless. We've increased security at all office locations and stationed additional personnel at your home. James nodded grimly. How's my family? We moved Mrs. Wilson and your children to the lake house last night as a precaution. The property's security system is fully activated, and we have 2 guards on site. The personal cost of his stand was mounting. His children were missing school. His family was effectively in hiding. Death threats were arriving from anonymous accounts blaming him for stranded travelers and economic losses. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His childhood friend Devin Washington had arrived from Atlanta on one of the few flights still operating. Man, you've started a revolution, Devin said, embracing him, and also possibly World War III in the airline industry. Despite the tension, James smiled. He and Devin had been inseparable since 3rd grade, attending Howard University together. Before their careers took different paths, James to technology, Devin to medicine. Thanks for coming, James said sincerely. Amara thought I needed someone to talk sense into me. Actually, Devin replied, settling into an armchair, I'm here to make sure you don't back down too easily. Some battles need fighting all the way through. The 2 men ordered room service and talked as news played silently on the television. Devin reminded James of a similar incident during their college years, being removed from a restaurant despite having reservations, watching white customers seated ahead of them. Remember what you said that night? Devin asked. You said someday you'd own the restaurant and the whole damn block it sat on. James nodded. Instead, I built software that runs airlines. And now they know exactly who they messed with. As they talked, James's phone buzzed with an update from his technical team. Per his instructions, they had implemented the most severe system restrictions, a complete maintenance mode that allowed only emergency operations and aircraft already in flight to reach their destinations. No new departures were being processed for any of the 3 airlines. The television switched to live coverage from airports nationwide. Departure boards showed endless red canceled notifications. Airline employees looked shell-shocked as they faced increasingly hostile passengers. Financial channels reported that trading of airline stocks had been temporarily halted after falling more than 20%. Do you believe James has gone too far in his response to discrimination? Comment number 1 if you think his actions are justified, or number 2 if you believe he's causing too much collateral damage to innocent travelers. Hit like if you believe people with power have a responsibility to use it against injustice, and subscribe for more stories of accountability in action. The real question hanging in the balance: when fighting systemic discrimination, how do you measure the appropriate response? Let's see if James has crossed a line he can't return from. At midday, James received a call from an unexpected source, his rabbi. Though not particularly religious, James had maintained a connection with the synagogue Amara attended, finding wisdom in Rabbi Goldstein's perspectives on justice and ethics. "I've been watching the news, James," the rabbi said after pleasantries. "A modern-day plague grounding the airlines." "Something like that," James acknowledged. "You know, in our tradition, we believe justice must be proportional. An eye for an eye wasn't about revenge, but about limiting punishment to match the crime." The rabbi paused. "Many innocent people are suffering now." The observation struck a nerve. James had been wrestling with this very question. "What would you have me do? Accept a voucher and an insincere apology? Allow them to continue humiliating people who look like me but lack my resources to fight back?" "Of course not," Rabbi Goldstein replied. "Justice requires accountability. But remember that your goal is change, not destruction. When Pharaoh finally released our people, Moses didn't burn Egypt to the ground in retaliation." After the call, James stood at the hotel window, watching planes that should have been taking off sitting motionless at gates. His phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. "Technical team advises we can't maintain these restrictions beyond 48 hours without risking breach of contract claims. Decision point approaching." The walls seemed to close in. James had unleashed a power that was affecting far more people than those directly responsible for his humiliation. Was he becoming what he despised? Someone who wielded power without regard for collateral damage? His thoughts were interrupted by breaking news on the television. Airline CEO Thomas Bradley was holding an impromptu press conference. Looking haggard and defensive, Bradley read from a prepared statement. "We are experiencing significant technical issues with our scheduling and reservation systems. Our team is working around the clock to resolve these issues, which are affecting operations across our network. We apologize to our customers for the inconvenience and are providing accommodations and rebooking assistance." Not one word about the discrimination incident. Not one acknowledgement of the real cause of the technical issues. Just corporate doublespeak designed to obscure rather than illuminate. James's phone rang again. "Vanessa, I just watched Bradley's statement," he said before she could speak. "Completely missed the point," she agreed. "But there's news from their board. They've asked Bradley to step aside temporarily while they address the crisis. Lisa Warren is taking over as interim CEO." Lisa Warren. James knew her by reputation, a former operations executive who had recently joined the airline's board. She had a record of directness and ethical leadership in her previous positions. "She's requesting a private meeting," Vanessa continued. "No PR teams, no lawyers, just you and her." James considered the request. "What's your assessment?" "It could be a genuine attempt to resolve this appropriately," Vanessa replied. "Or a more sophisticated version of the same stonewalling. Hard to tell without meeting her." After discussing security arrangements, James agreed to meet Warren at a neutral location, a private dining room at the Four Seasons Hotel. As the meeting time approached, he felt the weight of countless expectations pressing down. His employees, watching to see if he would stand firm. His family, worried for his safety and reputation. The thousands of stranded travelers, unaware that their fate rested in his hands. In his hotel bathroom, James splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. The man looking back seemed simultaneously powerful and vulnerable, determined and uncertain. "What's the endgame here?" he asked himself. "What does victory actually look like?" The answer came with surprising clarity. Not revenge, not humiliation for those who had humiliated him, but change. Real, lasting change that would prevent others from experiencing what he had endured. With that clarity, Dr. James Wilson straightened his tie and prepared to determine whether 3 major airlines would fly tomorrow. The Four Seasons private dining room offered a sanctuary of hushed elegance amid the national aviation crisis. James arrived 15 minutes early, accompanied by a security detail that swept the room before positioning themselves discreetly outside. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, He could see Denver International Airport in the distance, its runways unnaturally still, like arteries after a heart attack. At precisely 3 o'clock, interim CEO Lisa Warren arrived alone as agreed. Her late 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to crisis management, she extended her hand to James. "Dr. Wilson, thank you for agreeing to meet. I won't waste your time with platitudes or denials." James gestured to the table set for two. As they sat, Warren declined the offered wine and went straight to the point. "What happened to you was inexcusable discrimination, and our company's response was equally inexcusable. I'm not here to defend either." James studied her, searching for insincerity, but finding none. "That's refreshingly direct, Ms. Warren. Most executives would be blaming unfortunate miscommunications by now." "I've spent 30 years in this industry," Warren replied. "I've seen how airlines handle these incidents. Deny, deflect, settle quietly, change nothing. It's a playbook that's failed passengers of color repeatedly, and it failed you spectacularly." She opened a portfolio and slid several documents across the table. "These are the preliminary findings of our internal investigation, which I initiated 2 hours after taking temporary control. I believe they'll match your experience." James scanned the documents. They contained unvarnished accounts from multiple crew members, including admissions that James had been fully compliant and properly seated. Captain Stevens had acknowledged making no effort to verify the actual situation before ordering James's removal. Most tellingly, William Thornton had admitted demanding the seat upgrade because he always gets what he wants. "This is unexpected," James acknowledged. "Honesty shouldn't be unexpected," Warren said. "That's part of our problem." For the next hour, they engaged in the first genuine conversation about the incident and its implications. Warren asked questions about James's experience, not just on that flight, but throughout his career. James shared insights about the constant calculations black travelers make, whether to speak up or stay quiet, when to assert rights versus when to retreat for safety. The discussion evolved into what meaningful accountability would look like, not just for this incident, but for the culture that enabled it. "Firing a few employees won't change anything," James explained. "They're symptoms, not causes. Your entire organization needs structural change in how it identifies, prevents, and responds to discrimination." Warren nodded thoughtfully. "I have some ideas, but I'd value your perspective on specific protocols that might actually work." Together, they began drafting a framework for accountability. Warren proposed comprehensive anti-bias training for all customer-facing employees. James countered that training alone was insufficient without accountability metrics and regular testing. Warren suggested a diverse passenger advisory council with actual authority. James recommended technology solutions that would flag and prevent discriminatory reseating decisions. As they worked, James observed the racial dynamics playing out, even in this crisis negotiation. Despite being the wronged party with extraordinary leverage, he found himself modulating his tone to avoid appearing angry or threatening. Warren, despite her genuine commitment to resolution, occasionally slipped into defensive postures when racial patterns were highlighted too directly. By early evening, they had constructed a preliminary agreement. The airline would acknowledge the discrimination publicly without equivocation. The employees directly involved would face appropriate consequences. Most importantly, the company would implement comprehensive anti-discrimination protocols with measurable outcomes, external auditing, and significant financial commitments. "In exchange," Warren said, "we need your help restoring operations. Thousands of travelers are stranded, including many families and vulnerable individuals." James considered the human cost of continuing the system restrictions. "I can authorize a phased restoration beginning tonight, provided we announce the accountability framework publicly tomorrow morning." Warren extended her hand. "You have my word. The press conference is already scheduled for 9 a.m. As they finalized details, James received an alert on his phone. Social media was erupting with a new development. The rival airlines, desperate to capitalize on the crisis, had begun offering deeply discounted fares to stranded passengers. "Your competitors are using this as a marketing opportunity," James observed Riley. Warren checked her own phone and laughed without humor, while simultaneously reviewing their own diversity practices, I imagine. Nothing motivates corporate conscience like watching a competitor implode. Before departing, Warren hesitated. "Dr. Wilson, may I speak candidly about something personal?" James nodded, curious. "I've been in aviation for 3 decades, often as the only woman in the room. I've faced discrimination, though never as blatant as what you experienced. I thought I understood, but this crisis has shown me how much I didn't see. How racial discrimination is both similar to and profoundly different from what I've faced." The admission seemed to cost her something in professional composure, but gained much in human connection. "Recognition is the first step," James replied. "That's all any of us can ask for, to be seen accurately." After Warren left, James called Vanessa and his technical team to begin implementing the phase system restoration. Priority would be given to flights with stranded children, medical necessities, and other humanitarian concerns. "We're really doing this?" Vanessa confirmed. "You trust her to follow through?" "We'll know by 9 a.m., James replied. "And if she doesn't, we've demonstrated we can shut them down again." Next, he called Amara at the lake house, updating her on the agreement and asking about the children. "They're coping," Amara said. "Zora's school friends have been incredibly supportive online. Isaiah is quieter, but he told me tonight he's proud of you for not backing down. Tell them I'll be home soon," James promised. "The worst is over." As he ended the call, another unexpected one came through. William Thornton, the passenger who had demanded James's seat. "Dr. Wilson," Thornton began awkwardly, "I want to apologize personally for my behavior on the flight. I was stressed about a meeting and took it out on you. It was inexcusable." James listened silently, noting the careful avoidance of any mention of racial motivation. "I'm trying to learn from this," Thornton continued into the silence. "I've donated to the United Negro College Fund, and am speaking with a diversity consultant." "Mr. Thornton," James interrupted finally, "I appreciate you calling, but this isn't about charity donations or personal growth. It's about recognizing that when you saw me in that seat, you made assumptions based on my appearance. You believed your comfort and convenience outweighed my rights. That's the reality you need to confront." After a stunned silence, Thornton responded with unexpected humility. "You're right, and I'm sorry." Throughout the night, James and his technical team worked on restoring airline systems. By midnight, limited flights began taking off, primarily those with humanitarian priorities. News coverage shifted from crisis to cautious optimism, though speculation about the mysterious technical issues continued. As dawn approached, James stood at his hotel window watching the first rays of sunlight illuminate aircraft finally moving on distant runways. Something had shifted in him during this ordeal, a recognition of both his power and its limitations, his responsibility to use that power judiciously but unflinchingly when necessary. In 3 hours, he would stand beside Lisa Warren at a press conference that would either confirm his faith in the possibility of corporate accountability or prove that faith misplaced. Either way, the aviation industry would never see him, or passengers who looked like him, quite the same way again. Morning light streamed through the windows of the hotel conference room as technicians performed final sound checks and adjusted lighting. News crews from every major network had assembled, sensing that this joint appearance by Dr. James Wilson and interim CEO Lisa Warren would provide answers to the aviation crisis that had paralyzed the nation for 3 days. James adjusted his tie in a small preparation room, reviewing talking points with Vanessa. They had agreed he would speak second, after Warren made the airline's official statement. His security team reported that the hotel perimeter was secure, though protesters had gathered outside, some supporting him, others blaming him for travel disruptions. "Are you ready for this?" Vanessa asked, studying his face for signs of doubt. "As ready as I'll ever be," James replied. "Either they follow through today, or we demonstrate that our leverage wasn't a one-time option." At precisely 9 o'clock, they entered the conference room to a storm of camera flashes and shouted questions. Lisa Warren approached the podium first, her expression solemn but resolute. "Good morning. I'm here to address the events of the past 3 days and, more importantly, the incident that triggered them." Warren's voice was steady as she continued. 4 days ago, Dr. James Wilson, a first-class passenger on Flight 2247, was wrongfully removed from his rightfully purchased seat to accommodate another passenger's preference. This removal was executed despite Dr. Wilson having done nothing wrong and having shown valid documentation for his seat assignment. She paused, making eye contact with the assembled press. "Let me be absolutely clear. What happened was racial discrimination. It was wrong, inexcusable, and reflects failures at multiple levels of our organization." The room fell silent at her direct acknowledgement, something virtually unprecedented in corporate crisis management. Effective immediately, the following actions are being taken, Warren continued. First, the flight attendants directly involved in the incident have been terminated. Captain Richard Stevens has been suspended pending review by our Flight Standards Board. Second, we are implementing comprehensive anti-discrimination protocols across our entire operation, details of which will be published on our website by noon today. She outlined the specifics James had helped develop: mandatory quarterly training with measurable outcomes, an independent passenger advocacy council with oversight authority, new technology safeguards to prevent discriminatory reseating, and a $20 million scholarship fund for minority students pursuing aviation careers. Finally, and most importantly, Warren concluded, we extend our unreserved apology to Dr. Wilson and to every passenger who has ever experienced discrimination on our airline. We cannot change the past, but we can and will do better in the future. When James stepped to the podium, the room erupted in questions. He raised a hand for silence. "Throughout my career, I've experienced countless moments of discrimination. Some subtle, others blatant. What made this incident different wasn't the discrimination itself, but my capacity to respond effectively." His measured tone belied the emotion beneath his words. "I recognize that the past 3 days have caused hardship for thousands of travelers. That was never my intention. My goal was accountability, not revenge, not punitive damages, but meaningful change that would prevent others from experiencing what I experienced." James explained that full system restoration had begun overnight and would be complete by noon. He emphasized that the incident represented a larger pattern in American society, where even the most successful Black Americans faced routine discrimination. "What happened to me happens daily to people who lack my resources and leverage. They have no recourse, no means to demand accountability. Their dignity is violated, and they're expected to accept inadequate apologies and move on." He leaned slightly forward. "That cycle ends today, at least with this airline." The press conference transitioned to questions, with reporters pressing for details about the technical issues that had grounded the airlines. Both James and Warren adhered to carefully crafted language about necessary system maintenance, without explicitly confirming the connection to the discrimination incident. When asked if he regretted the disruption caused, James responded thoughtfully, "I regret that it became necessary. I regret that thousands of innocent travelers were affected. But I don't regret insisting on meaningful accountability rather than token gestures." As the conference concluded, social media exploded with reactions. Hashtags like James Wilson stands and accountability now trended alongside more critical tags like none should travel chaos and too far. Public opinion remained sharply divided, many applauding James for using his power to combat discrimination, others arguing that his response had been disproportionate. Legal experts debated potential shareholder lawsuits against the airline for capitulating to James's demands. Aviation analysts speculated about long-term industry changes. Civil rights leaders hailed the incident as a watershed moment in corporate accountability for racial discrimination. James returned to the Aerotech Atlanta headquarters that afternoon to a standing ovation from employees who lined the hallways. Many shared their own stories of discrimination, thanking him for taking a stand that represented all of them. In his office, James found dozens of messages waiting, from corporate leaders seeking diversity consulting, civil rights organizations requesting partnerships, and educational institutions offering honorary degrees. He set them all aside to focus on a video call with his family. Amara's face appeared on screen, relief evident in her expression. "You were magnificent," she said. "Clear, dignified, powerful." Zora and Isaiah crowded into the frame, eager to share their perspectives. 15-year-old Zora was animated. "Dad, you're trending everywhere. My friends are calling you the corporate justice warrior." 13-year-old Isaiah, typically reserved, spoke with unusual intensity. "You showed them that we don't have to just take it. That matters, Dad." Their reactions reinforced James's conviction that despite the complications and criticisms, his stand had been necessary, not just for himself but for his children and their generation. After the call, James met with his executive team to discuss the company's path forward. The crisis had unexpectedly positioned Aerotech as a corporate leader in anti-discrimination advocacy, creating both opportunities and challenges. "Our competitors are already reaching out," Richard Dawson reported. "They want assurances that what happened to these 3 airlines won't happen to them. And multiple Fortune 500 companies outside aviation are requesting consultations on diversity protocols," added Alexander Chen. "They're terrified of being the next case study in what happens when discrimination meets accountability." James considered these developments thoughtfully. "We're not in the diversity consulting business, but we are in the business of creating systems that work fairly and efficiently. Perhaps there's a way to build anti-discrimination safeguards into all our products moving forward." That evening, as James prepared to return home to Atlanta, he received notification that the airline systems had been fully restored. Flights were operating normally, though the backlog of stranded passengers would take days to clear. The airline's stock had stabilized at 15% below its pre-crisis level. Significant, but not catastrophic. Lisa Warren called with an update. "The board has unanimously approved all the measures we discussed. They're also requesting that you consider joining our newly formed Passenger Advocacy Council once the dust settles." "Let's revisit that in a few months," James replied, not yet ready to commit to any ongoing relationship with the airline. Before boarding his flight home, on a competing carrier, James gave one final interview to the journalist who had first revealed his identity. When asked what message he hoped people would take from the incident, he responded, "Power without accountability corrupts systems, but power with responsibility can transform them. I hope that other corporate leaders, especially those from marginalized communities, recognize that they can demand dignity not just for themselves, but for everyone their influence touches." As his plane lifted off from Denver, James looked down at the sprawling airport returning to normal operations. The crisis was ending, but its ripple effects were just beginning. In boardrooms, in crew training sessions, and in the countless invisible calculations made when passengers of different backgrounds encountered each other in the confined spaces of air travel. For better or worse, the aviation industry would never be quite the same. And neither would Dr. James Wilson. 6 months after the incident that came to be known in aviation circles simply as the grounding, Dr. James Wilson stood before the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the United States Congress. Cameras captured his testimony for national broadcast as he addressed lawmakers on the intersection of corporate accountability, racial discrimination, and critical infrastructure. "The technology that powers our transportation systems is not neutral," James explained, his voice carrying through the wood-paneled chamber. "It reflects the values, biases, and priorities of those who create and control it. When those systems encounter discrimination, they must be designed to resist rather than reinforce it." The committee chair, a veteran legislator from Michigan, leaned forward. "Dr. Wilson, some have characterized your actions as a dangerous precedent, suggesting that individuals with control over critical infrastructure could use that leverage for personal grievances. How do you respond?" James considered the question carefully. "Chairwoman, I would draw a distinction between personal grievances and fundamental rights violations. What occurred wasn't a customer service issue. It was discrimination that reflects systemic problems affecting countless Americans daily. My response wasn't about personal vindication, but about structural accountability." Over the past 6 months, the aviation industry had undergone remarkable transformations. The new industry standards developed after the grounding required airlines to implement anti-discrimination protocols with measurable outcomes and regular auditing. Flight crews received comprehensive training on recognizing and addressing implicit bias. Passenger rights were clearly displayed at gates and on boarding passes. At Aerotech Solutions, James had led an even more fundamental change. The company introduced built-in equality metrics in its software, algorithms that flagged potentially discriminatory patterns in seating assignments, security screenings, and service delivery. These fairness audits provided airlines with real-time data on disparities that might otherwise remain invisible. Our systems now measure fairness alongside efficiency and profit, James explained to investors during a recent earnings call. Because an airline that discriminates isn't actually functioning optimally, it's failing a significant portion of its customer base. Former CEO Thomas Bradley had experienced his own transformation, from defensive corporate protector to reluctant advocate for change. After a period of reflection and extensive work with diversity consultants, he began speaking to industry groups about the costs of ignoring discrimination. "I was blind to it because I didn't have to see it," he admitted during a keynote address at the International Aviation Conference. "That blindness cost our airline millions in direct losses and incalculable damage to our reputation." Flight attendants Bethany Carter and Patricia Miller had taken different paths after their termination. Carter entered a community service program working with minority youth, later describing the experience as transformative. Miller fought her termination through union grievance procedures, but eventually dropped the case when faced with overwhelming evidence of discriminatory conduct. Perhaps most surprising was William Thornton's evolution. The passenger whose entitlement had triggered the crisis established a foundation funding minority business initiatives. He reached out to James repeatedly, eventually securing a brief meeting where he demonstrated genuine understanding of how his actions reflected unconscious racial bias. "I never saw myself as prejudiced," Thornton told James during their meeting. "But I've come to recognize that not seeing it doesn't mean it wasn't there." For James and his family, life had acquired new dimensions. Aerotech Solutions expanded significantly, its ethical business framework becoming as much a selling point as its technological innovations. Companies across industries sought its expertise in building fairness metrics into critical systems. On a personal level, the Wilson family finally took their long-delayed vacation. James felt a particular satisfaction when boarding their first-class flight to Bora Bora, not because of the luxury, but because of the respectful, natural treatment they received from the flight crew. "Notice anything different?" Amara whispered, as they settled into their seats. James nodded. "They're treating us like everyone else." Progress. Industry publications now regularly featured James in articles about aviation's future. Business schools developed case studies on the Wilson T. doctrine of corporate accountability. A generation of black executives cited him as inspiration for using their positions to create systemic change rather than merely personal success. On the anniversary of the incident, the airline that had removed James held a diversity celebration, featuring speakers from civil rights organizations and testimonials from passengers of color about improved experiences. Critics dismissed it as corporate theater, but internal metrics showed measurable improvements in equitable treatment. James declined an invitation to the event, choosing instead to launch a mentorship program for minority tech students interested in transportation infrastructure. "Real change happens in the code and in the cockpit," he told the inaugural class, "not on the stage." The most profound transformations, however, occurred in private moments. During a father-son basketball game, Isaiah asked a question that caught James off guard. "Dad, if you didn't own the company that runs their computers, would you still have stood up to them?" James dribbled thoughtfully before answering. "I'd like to think so, but standing up looks different depending on your resources. Sometimes it's speaking out. Sometimes it's recording evidence. Sometimes it's simply surviving with your dignity intact." Isaiah nodded, processing this nuanced perspective on power and resistance. "I'm glad you had the power to fight back, but it's messed up that you needed it." "That's why we keep working," James replied, passing the ball. "So someday you won't." Perhaps the most symbolic moment came unexpectedly. Exactly 1 year after the grounding, James boarded a flight to Washington, D.C. to receive a humanitarian award. It was the same airline that had removed him, though the gate agents and flight attendants were different. As he settled into his first-class seat, an elderly white woman struggled to lift her luggage into the overhead compartment. Without hesitation, James stood to assist her. "Thank you so much," she said, then did a double take. "Wait, aren't you that man from the news? The one who shut down the airlines when they treated you badly?" "That's one way to describe it," James acknowledged with a smile. She studied him thoughtfully. "My grandson is black. He's flying by himself for the first time next month. Because of what you did, I worry a little less about how they'll treat him." As the plane accelerated down the runway, James reflected on the balance between consequence and compassion that drives lasting change. The incident had cost millions, disrupted thousands of lives, and created temporary chaos. But it had also forced a reckoning that gentle persuasion and gradual progress had failed to achieve for decades. Sometimes transformation required disruption. Sometimes justice demanded uncomfortable consequences. And sometimes the most powerful statement wasn't grounding planes, but ensuring they flew with equal dignity for all passengers. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination on your next flight? Would you speak up or stay silent? Comment below with your thoughts on how ordinary travelers can help create more equitable experiences. Hit like if this story made you think differently about the power we all have to create change. Subscribe for more stories of justice and accountability, and share this video with someone who needs to understand that discrimination has consequences. Thank you for watching, and remember, dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right worth fighting for. This powerful story reveals fundamental truths about power, discrimination, and accountability in America. Dr. Wilson's experience demonstrates how racism persists regardless of achievement or status. Even a CEO controlling airline technology faces the same indignities as countless other Black Americans. When systems fail to provide justice, those with leverage must sometimes use it to force accountability. The story illustrates that meaningful change rarely comes from polite requests alone. Sometimes disruption becomes necessary when traditional channels fail. However, it also shows the importance of proportional response, using power not for revenge, but to create lasting structural improvements. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative challenges us to examine our own roles in either perpetuating or dismantling discrimination. The transformation of various characters, from the defensive CEO to the entitled passenger, demonstrates that genuine growth begins with acknowledging uncomfortable truths about our biases. True justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoers, but creating systems where dignity is guaranteed for everyone, not just those with extraordinary resources to demand it. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination on your next flight? Would you speak up or stay silent? Comment below with your thoughts on how ordinary travelers can help create more equitable experiences. Hit like if this story made you think differently about the power we all have to create change. Subscribe for more stories of justice and accountability. And share this video with someone who needs to understand that discrimination has consequences. Thank you for watching. And remember, dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right worth fighting for.